Hello, welcome to Card Talk. I'm Brab989.
I'm Shotgun. Today we're going to be looking at two large creatures in Saurian, and they're both commons. You'll see these cards a lot. So the first one is Undagnathus. It's a 12 power beast. Has the effect while the tide is low, Undagnathus deals no damage when fighting. And the second card we're going to look at is Venator Altum, which is 7 power, 2 armor, dinosaur soldier. After Venator Altum is dealt damage, if the tide is low, exalt Venator Altum. Alright, both of these are high power creatures with a drawback. Just kind of looking at them, I think you would rather have Undagnathus in your deck. The problem with Altum is if you're playing in set and they have the tide, a 7 power creature exalting itself every time it's dealt damage can be quite a liability. Because I could take a turn where I throw a bunch of my smaller creatures into him and he's just exalting himself.
Yeah.
And so it's a nice and juicy amber prize. On the other hand, 7 power, 2 armor without a drawback isn't something you see too often. That said, there were cards like Troll. Mm-hmm. So I think Venator isn't a card that you're going to want to see much of.
Yeah, there are a few possible uses for Venator. If you get it with Buried Treasure that we covered earlier in the week, that could remove one of the amber from it to your pool. You could also see it helping set up a finishing play with Imperial Forge. You're definitely going to want to use that as the closer, though, because you don't want it to be loaded up with a bunch of amber. The amber on Venator makes Imperial Forge for cheaper. It does not use the amber on Venator. It could also potentially combo with the Medicus Lacus, which is basically a tide-dependent Brachus, so it allows you to spend amber on your creatures. So if it's loaded up, and then you play Imperial Forge, and you can both make your key cheaper and spend the amber on your Venator, that's going to be a pretty great game closer, but it's pretty niche. Not going to necessarily come up with one or both of those cards all the time. And as only a closer, what do you do if you get it in your opening hand? Like, it's just not going to do much for you. So I can see the complaints about Venator in a cross-set matchup. You might play it in a Dark Tidings matchup. I would be worried that you might just have to discard it. We'll have to see how it plays out, but there's a decent chance that it does more harm than good for you.
Yeah, it's going to depend a lot on what the other cards are in the house. You could use it to your advantage by exalting it, and then you use a different Saurian effect to move the amber onto the opponent. Mm-hmm. And whenever you put a Medicus down, your opponent will have to take the tide to cancel the threat, and Medicus is 5 power, so it's going to be harder to get rid of than Senator Brachus, which was a bit challenging to get rid of inside Worlds Collide, especially in Mass Mutation. So the 7 power, 2 armor creature, you're not getting rid of it that easily. It can remove threats. So I don't think it's a NARP level card. I think it could be okay to have one of them. You can't build a deck around this, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
You can also raise key cost with Faust by getting an amber on this guy.
That's true. It does synergize with the general sort of put amber on the board mechanic of Saurian, but I think, again, this kind of mirrors what we were saying in our discussion about Trojan Sauropod, which is that anytime you're giving your opponent the ability to make decisions and alter the game state, they're going to be able to shift that for their own advantage. So it's definitely a tricky card to use effectively, I think.
Right. Undagnathus, I think, is more interesting because 12 can fight almost anything off. And if the tide is low, okay, it deals no damage when fighting. Fine. It's just there. And it can still reap. You can put upgrades on it and make it do interesting things. Like you could equip a stunner to it, or maybe you put an academy training on it and it's just getting value. You can stockpile amber there. They don't necessarily have to raise the tide to get rid of it, but it would make it easier to fight for sure. And when the tide isn't low, you can take away several different threats, and you use ready and fight effects this card could really clean up on the other side of the board. So I think a lot of the big creatures we've seen usually have major drawbacks, like they come into play stunned, or they can only attack certain creatures. This reminds me of Troll, where it was 8 power and it can do stuff, except this is 12 power. So it is 1.5 times stronger than Troll and can do some serious cleanup.
Yeah, a giant body like this with very little downside is pretty great. I would be happy to have a few of these in my decks. I mean, even if the tide is low, okay, you can reap. You can reap with it still. That's fine. Your opponent's going to really struggle to get rid of it. It's a perfect place for you to stash Amber. Really make it hard for them to get that back and give you value off of your cards that want Amber on the board, like Faust. All right, that's been our look at Venator, Altum, and Undagnathus. Check back tomorrow for a look at another card.